Oh, hello, and welcome back to the Outdated Entertainment Hour. This show is going to be about the history of game shows, something I wouldn't dare sully myself with, but many people like them and have a good laugh and play along as they watch their televisions. I frankly don't have a television receiver, but, I'm an intellectual. Most unlike Bob Smith, who has spent years in professional wrestling. In fact, we're going to replay now a moment on the Outdated Wrestling Hour where his host there, Bob, 20 minutes from now, actually appeared on a game show. I never heard it before, but perhaps you'll find this amusing. I don't think it's amusing at all. But hang on, we'll be right back with more. Hello again, and welcome to TV Trivia Tumult. It's the finals of our trivia contest. Here's our guest, our special finalist, Bob 20 minutes from now. We got a special final question for Bob 20 minutes from now. If he gets the question correct, he wins a whole mess of cash or something. You ready there, Bob? Yeah, I'm ready as I'll ever be. I mean, how do I get involved in these things? Just calm down. You answer the question, you get some monies and stuffs. You ready? Now, we understand your category is professional wrestling. Why'd you choose that? I like it. Okay, good enough. Here's your question pertaining to pro wrestling. Who invented spackle? Spackle? Spackle. You mean the stuff that patch on walls? Yeah, who invented it? What does that have to do with professional wrestling? Well, it's on the walls and stuff. In arenas. You're full of it. I am sorry I ever got involved in this stupid trivia contest. Well, why don't you take a guess and see who invented it? Wild Bull Curry? It's the Outdated Entertainment Hour. Hey, what am I doing here? Where am I? What's going on here? Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Outdated Entertainment Hour. As we alluded to in our little wacky opener there, we're going to look at game shows. And we're going to go way back to the early days of television, not up till now. We're going to keep it strictly nostalgic on this one. And we have a very special guest in the famed podcaster, Steve Genarelli. So hang on right there. Get your chips, get your drinks. Keep some dice with you or keep a pen and pencil. Maybe you'll answer the big question, win thousands of valuable prizes. I don't know why, but I love game shows. I had, something. Steve brought this up one day, and I was like, "Holy smokes!" I've spent most of my life watching game shows. I really like game shows, so we're going to take a deep dive into them. Don't expect the newer ones. We're going to go way back there, and you're going to find out some people you'll be very surprised even hosted a game show. So hang with us. We're going to have a little commercial break here, and we will be right back to start the fun, frolic, and festivities. Count to 56 or so. We'll be right back. Attention, Gen Xers. If you'd like to explore the era that appeals to you, look no further than GenerationXWire.com. It's a generation who grew up with elite in entertainment, music, movies, TV, books, pro wrestling, and more. Finally has a one-stop destination for all their Gen X needs. From Aerosmith to Batman to the Killer Bees to the Twilight Zone, there's something for everybody at GenerationXWire.com. You won't find a more eclectic mix of pop culture content than at the leading website that specializes in the greatest generation, GenerationXWire.com. Check it out today. All right, cats and kittens, we're going to spin the big prize wheel to see how much money you'll make on this edition of the Outdated Entertainment Hour. Well, we don't have any money to offer you actually, but maybe a good time as we recall game shows, syndicated ones, nationally televised ones, stuff that's been on for 30 years and stuff that was on for 3 weeks. We're going to go over all of it on this particular episode. And our guest is one of my favorite podcasters in the world. His name is Steve Genarelli. We welcome him back to the show. Steve, hi.
Bob, it's great to be back. We have another great outdated idea about classic game shows that have been forgotten.
Well, you know what? Even if they're not forgotten, we can go over all kinds here. It really doesn't matter because as a little kid, I was fascinated by a show called Concentration on NBC in the mornings, hosted by Hugh Downs. And I used to love that show. I used to love that big electronic board where the numbers would spin and then it would
Yeah.
reveal a puzzle,
Oh, yeah.
and then they'd have to solve that puzzle. Looking for Godot. Yes, they would all applaud and they would win valuable prizes and ranges and money and everything else. But I just love game shows when I
but,
was a
but
little kid.
But what was cool about that era that we grew up in? Like this is like the 60s or the 70s, and that show was really, really popular. I mean, that was a show that everyone watched. But what was so cool was in that era of marketing, there was a board game Concentration based on the TV show. And my brother was into this show. He really enjoyed that show, and we get the board game home and it had the clues like on these rollers on this like white paper that you would roll, and that way you do a clue, then you keep rolling the paper and you have another
Oh,
clue. It
that's
was so
right.
much fun. It was so much fun.
That's right. The game it was a board
Board
game.
game. Yeah.
Oh, I had that too.
Isn't that
Oh,
awesome?
the little cardboard numbers that you would flip. Oh my god, you're bringing
Yeah.
back memories, man.
It was so
Holy
much
smokes.
fun. It was so much fun.
It was good. It worked just like the game show did.
And I'm surprised that that's one of the few shows they haven't tried to revive. I don't think they've ever in recent years tried to revive that one. And I
Actually, thanks to a
did
network
they?
called Buzzer. You ever see the
Buzzer?
Buzzer network? The
I'm
Buzzer
familiar
network,
with it, but I don't really watch it. But yeah,
it's all old game shows.
sure.
It's all reruns of game shows from the 50s, 60s, 70s, you name it. It's on there. And I think they have some of the revivals. I think they tried it in the 80s.
Okay.
Somebody tried to revive it. I don't know how
Mhm.
long it lasted, but I don't know if they have any of the classic episodes from NBC on there, but
Yeah.
all I know is that, yeah, Concentration, man, that was my jam when I was 4.
But, it's funny because there's a lot of these shows that were brought back in recent years, but were, like, really big, like, a long, long time ago. Like, I'll give you for instance, I mean, like, right now, if you're flipping the channels any time of day, there's a good chance you're gonna find Family Feud with Steve Harvey on some channel, and Steve Harvey does a tremendous job at that, but, like, when I was a kid in the '70s, Richard Dawson was the king of that, and, I mean, he was so popular. I mean, women were dying to get kissed by Richard Dawson. There were women that hated him because he was kissing all the women. I mean, it was causing this great controversy, but that show is really, still very popular today, of course.
Well, it works, and Steve got smart. Family Feud had gone through a whole host of hosts that all lasted 2 years. They had Richard
Right.
Karn for a while,
Yeah, Louis
other
Anderson.
people, Louis Anderson was on for a couple of years, Donald Hurley, of all people, was a host
Yes.
for a couple of years, and then he came on, and it just worked. Actually, I thought he got off to kind of a sluggish start, but then it just hit.
Right.
It really hit, so he bought it. I think he
Mhm.
owns most of the show now, from what I understand, and he's gonna be there as long as he wants to be. The show's a massive hit. It's all over the Game Show Network. They show the reruns. It's all over
Yeah.
Channel 9 here in New York. They show it
Right.
like 14 hours every broadcast day. It's amazing. It's always on Channel 9 every time I turn it on. But you know what? It's a good, funny show.
It is,
He's
yeah,
he's
he's
good at it.
fantastic.
You could tell he's just got a way with people. The success is well deserved.
Now, I'm gonna mention a show that, I'm sure you would remember it, but this is more of a cult favorite than one that people, like, immediately would go to. This is probably my all-time favorite game show. Are you familiar with Treasure Hunt?
I used to watch Treasure Hunt when I was a wee tadpole.
Really, really.
Yeah, sure, I saw Treasure Hunt.
Well,
It was wild, man. It was something that was pretty wild for its era.
the one that you probably remember, I think Jan Marie may have been the host of, but the one that I was more familiar with was the remake with Jeff Edwards. It was a Chuck Barris production, and basically this was the closest. Bob and I got to know each other through pro wrestling, and this was the closest to pro wrestling as any game show could be, because basically Jeff Edwards would open. Somebody would pick a box. There'd be like 50 boxes. He'd open the box, and he'd peek his eyes in, and there could be a clunk inside. There could be a check for $50,000. But all of a sudden, a skit would emerge. People would come out of the back, and it would be like this big drama ensuing for 10 minutes. And at the end, the person would either win a clunk like a box of paper clips, or they would win a real prize with real money. So it was really a hilarious show. You got to revisit it if you can find it with Jeff Edwards.
Is it out there anywhere?
There's some episodes on YouTube, and I'm sure you might remember this. They had the bonded security agent, Emil Oturi, at the beginning of every episode. And he would, Jeff would say, did you hide the check? And he'd say, yes, I did. And he was like a man of few words.
Oh, well, because he was a security guy.
Oh, yeah. They had beautiful models on there, too, like Jan Speck, these really hot models. So, great show.
I was just thinking about women on game shows. They were always pointing at things, from The Price is Right to everything else. They were only there as an adornment. Well, I think it's the healthiest thing now that on today's game shows, there's women
Right.
hosts that are catching on.
Oh,
And I think
absolutely.
it's good. It's
No,
really great.
I do think it's good, and not to be sexist or anything, but I have fond memories as a young boy growing up watching Barker's Beauties on Price is Right. Diane Parkinson was my favorite. She was unbelievable. Those bikinis.
Well, you're only human. Oh, yeah, there was a few of them in there, yeah. They were all I think 2 or 3 of them were Playboy models, if I'm not
Yeah, they
mistaken,
were. They were.
and,
Yeah. Then
they loved it.
there was Holly, the redhead. She was a very all American sweet girl. She was the sweet one of the bunch,
Does that
but
mean the
boy,
other ones were evil or something? What do you mean?
no, no. She was the girl you could bring home to your mom, I guess.
Okay.
But anyhow, let's talk some more game shows here. Do you remember a show called The Liars Club?
I do. I think that was a syndicated game
It
show, if I'm not
was.
mistaken.
It was. Now the interesting thing about that, and I posted an old show on my Facebook group, but Facebook page. Rod Serling of Twilight Zone hosted the original version for a couple of years. They filmed it in L.A., and he had a couple of regular stars that would be on the panel with him, which were Jonathan Harris, Dr. Smith from Lost in Space, and also Betty White, who became really famous in the Golden Girls years later. But it's a great show. They bring on these weird objects, and the contestants would try to guess what it really was, and the actors that would be there would try to give you hints or make suggestions of what this item was. And it was really a neat show, and it was on in syndication throughout the 70s and maybe even the early 80s. So it was a really good show.
As we talk about this, I wanna give a shout out to those perennial game show panelists. Remember
Yeah.
how a lot of them would have a panel?
Oh,
And
yeah.
you would see these same faces go from show to show to show to show, like Arlene Francis and Cesar Romero and
Oh,
Bill
yeah.
Dana
Oh,
and
yeah.
Betty White, and just go down the list of the people who Bill Cullen would be a guest constantly.
Yeah.
It you could always count on them to add, some mirth, very entertaining fun to these shows. That's why they were chosen, I think, because they had that gift of gab that would,
Oh,
serve the
yeah.
audience well, and, a tip of the cap to those people who weren't the hosts, but they were the regulars.
Oh, yeah. I mean, of course, on the Gong Show, you had J.P. Morgan as a regular, but you had people like Artie Johnson, Steve Garvey from the Dodgers, Charo. But there were other people like Dick Gautier, who played Jaime on Get Smart. He was a frequent guest on these shows. Larry Hovis from Hogan's Heroes was on the Liars Club all the time. In fact, he produced Liars Club in the mid 70s. Bobby Van and his wife, Elaine Joyce, they were on Tattletales and on many of these game shows. And of course, Match Game, you had the great chemistry of Charles Nelson Riley and what was her name? Brett Summers, of course. How can I forget Brett Summers?
The wife of Jack
Jack
Klugman,
Klugman, that's right.
who did appear on one of the weeks of the show. I don't, and then I
Mhm.
understand they split up not long after that, but I don't know if one had anything to do with the other. But yeah, and they had regulars on there too. Richard Dawson eventually was a regular in the
Oh,
match
yeah.
game, and a
Yeah,
whole
Fanny
mess.
Flagg,
Fanny
remember
Flag,
Fanny Flagg?
yeah,
Yeah, classic.
it was a really funny show. Gene Rayburn was a funny guy. Weaned, by the way, on the old Steve Allen show.
Yeah,
He
oh,
was a
yeah,
regular on
yeah.
the original Steve Allen show. So
Yeah, yeah, he went all the way back to the '50s and, had great, chops in the game show world, and I'll give you a guilty pleasure of mine. This show only lasted, like, a year or 2, and there's a couple episodes on YouTube, at the time that Match Game kind of, like, was at the end of its run, they had milked it for all it's worth. They decided to combine a Match Game with Hollywood Squares, and they had, like, an hour version of it
oh
on
yeah,
NBC, remember that? And they had, Bowser from
Bowser.
Sha-Na-Na, John Bauman was
Ugh,
the host of the of the Hollywood Squares part, and Gene Rayburn did the Match Game part. But they had a really good theme to the show, which was really, inspiring. It would have been a great wrestling theme song, but, it's a really a neat show to watch. I'm sure
I
you would enjoy it.
I didn't cotton to Bowser. It just didn't work for me. But I will say he's a great guy, by the way.
Yeah,
He's an awesome individual. Bowser's a
okay.
wonderful guy, the Sha Na Na guy.
Yeah.
Just a tremendous guy. I actually met him once. He's fabulous. I will say that the one thing, if we juxtapose the early game shows that we're talking about to the stuff that's on now in prime time, everything is so blown up and dramatic and
It is.
and
It
it's
is.
like, I don't know if I cotton to it. I think it's kind of, pre-programmed and kind of fake.
Right. No,
I
it is.
honestly think that it
Kinda
seems
desperate.
yeah, it's desperate. I mean, and this all started with, the recent what was Regis film, Do You Wanna Be a
Who Wants to Be a
Millionaire?
Millionaire? Yeah.
And those shows and, Deal or No
Deal or No
Deal,
Deal. Mhm.
everything got real serious.
Yeah,
This
Biggest
is
Loser.
life-changing money. Will they win it?
Mhm.
You know what? I found it to be, hokey. I just it just didn't have the charm that the old time game shows did for me, and
No,
no sense of humor at all.
no, bring up a brilliant point, and if you watch these old shows, and 2 come to mind specifically, What's My Line and To Tell the Truth. Those shows were very subdued, but you had these very genteel nice people as the host and the celebrities, and you just had a great time watching it. I mean, to tell the truth, you'd have to guess who a certain person was, or guess what they did. I mean, they had a couple of fake people pretending to be this person, and then What's My Line? You have to guess what type of job they're in or what field they're in, and they'd have a celebrity guess at the end who you try to pick. I mean, there is a show, like the Masked Singer, I guess, would be the equivalent.
Ugh.
They've jazzed that up. I know it's a goofy show I would never watch in a million years, but that is kinda steals the idea of a "What's My Line?" and trying to turn it into something like that, so but it was a very different era back then.
Well, I remember the host was Gary Moore the host of that show for a while?
Gary Moore, yeah, you had Kitty Carlisle and Peggy Cass were regular, people in the chairs, and Bill Cullen, oftentimes, game show Hall of Famer Bill Cullen would be on these shows, but these were the kind of shows as a young kid I would go to my nana's house, my grandmother's house, and watch with my grandparents, my aunt, and these were just great, great programs. You could just enjoy them. There was no thing to make your heart race. You could just enjoy them, learn something, and go on to something else.
Yeah, it was just fun. They just
Yeah,
had a sense of you know, kick your shoes off and have a little whimsy for half an hour, and that's why I think today is it's just add more stress to your life. Haven't we got enough stress without these stressful game shows
way
with
too
people
much.
ripping their hair out and going, "Am I gonna win $750,000?" And
Yeah.
here's the family, and the family's rooting now. I'm like, "Good gravy, man." I mean, it's just and these souped up primetime things on NBC. What is it? Deal or No Deal Island?
Right, right,
I
right.
I haven't even flipped it on. I'll be honest with you. I just heard the concept and I didn't like it, so
Yeah,
it's
they're
not
trying to
for me.
they're trying to turn a game show into a reality show, and I mean, I can see why they're doing it because I know reality shows are really popular now. I mean, there's something to be said for just a classic game show. I know ABC is trying to, bring back shows like Match Game, and they've done it over the last few years with some success. But it just when you watch these old shows, especially the ones like What's My Line, it's just a slower pace. It's definitely a perfect look back at a certain period of time, like the '60s and the '70s. You can see the clothing, the hairstyles, the way people talk with each other is much more respectfully and nice.
Yeah, it's
It's
courtesy.
a lot of courtesy, yeah, a lot of,
Yeah.
and it's just nice. It's just nice to see how life was in those days. It's a time capsule, is what I was looking to say.
Mhm. I mean, it's a nice thing if you watch even today's. And by the way, Drew Carey does a great job. I never thought he'd last as long as he did on
Price is
Bob
right.
Barker's old year, The Price is Right. But I
Yeah.
will say that he's done a wonderful job, and that's still got the old feel, even though people hop around like like, it's "Let's make a deal." "Let's make a deal" was very damaging too because people that said you gotta act like an idiot to
I
get on
didn't
the
like
show,
that. I still don't
right?
like it. I didn't
Right.
like that one.
And that was on for a long time, "Let's make a deal." But as
Another
far
show.
as
Go
far
ahead,
as The
Bob.
Price is Right goes, I just wanted to say that I like Drew Carey's countenance on that show because he's not over the top at all,
Right. He lets the
and
game be the star.
let the game be the star, and, he does a fabulous job. I never thought a stand-up comedian would kind of forsake that to do a game show, but you know what? How long has he done it now? It's a long time now.
Probably a dozen years at least.
At least, yeah.
Now another show I would like to mention because it was huge in the day, but is pretty much forgotten now for the most part, even though they've tried to revive it a few times, is Hollywood Squares with Peter Marshall. And as much as Richard Dawson became, the star of Family Feud, and he was kind of the focal point of Match Game before that, I mean, nobody was bigger than Paul Lynde in the center square. I mean, he was the most hilarious guy in the world. And, and as it turned out, I think Hollywood Squares, the original run that ran from like the late '60s to maybe the early '80s, it probably ended because I know Paul Lynde died around 80 or 81. And, you can't go on with the Hollywood Squares without him. I think that's probably how they looked at it.
It was a very funny show and probably the most risque thing on TV.
It was. It was. It was a
Someone
lot of
printed
fun.
out someone on Facebook printed out an entire list of jokes that the various comedians told, and they were really straddling that line, but they were all really funny. They were funny jokes.
But you know what was cool about that too, is the people that were always there, like, in the Hollywood Squares, that big set they had. People like, Wally Cox, and, was it Charlie Weaver was there all the time? George Gobel. I mean,
Mhm.
these classic characters, from the '70s that you don't see anymore. Of course, they're all dead, obviously, but it was it was just great to see them back then, and it was a ratings bonanza.
Charlie Weaver, a relative of Sigourney Weaver. Did you know
That's
that?
true. That is
Yeah.
true.
Also also, I believe for former professional wrestling champion Nick Bockwinkel was a guest on the Hollywood Squares once and won money. Won some
That's
stuff.
right.
He
That
wasn't
that
there as a celebrity, he was there as a contestant,
right, right. Yeah,
as was Ox Baker on The Price is Right.
yeah, a young Kirstie Alley before Star Trek, before Cheers was on the Match Game. So there's a lot of them out there
As a contestant?
as a contestant. Yes,
I did not know that. That's
yes, sir.
yeah,
Yes,
that's
sir.
good. What else you got for us in terms of classic stuff?
Now this is one that I've never really even seen other than clips here and there, but there was a one that was extremely popular in the '50s called Queen for a Day, and this one had meaning for me in that my beloved grandmother apparently she had gone on this and won. I don't think she won like lots of money, but she may have won a little bit of money, and she won like things to take home, like appliances or whatever. But my grandmother was a voracious reader, and I think she just got picked from the crowd, and she was, really good with trivia because she read a lot, and, she won, and every once in a while, every once in a blue moon, she'd say, or her daughter would say, "Oh, yeah, remember, Ma, you were on Queen for a Day, and you were Queen for a Day," and So that was a really popular show in the 50s, and it was really a big rating show in the 50s.
Queen for a Day. Boy, you're going back.
That's an oldie.
Holy smokes, yeah.
And we did talk a little bit about Mash Game with Gene Rayburn. I mean, again, another show with all the double entendres. uh,
Hmm.
and, you had all the crazy, questions there. Dumb Dora said, and it just this is a crazy show, but one that we have barely mentioned that I've got to say is one of my all time favorites was the Gong Show with Chuck Barris. I mean, not so much for the people that came on to be contestants, but just the hilarity, the craziness, like when Gene the Dancing Machine would come out and all this stuff would be thrown at him, and he'd be dancing away there, and Duvall, I think it was Frank Duvall, was the musical conductor. The band was playing, and yeah, and Duvall had done the theme for My Three Sons, by the way, in the '60s. But that was just a
Yeah.
great show, and Rip Taylor would be on there, and it was just all kinds of '70s stars were on that show.
J.P. Morgan was a frequent guest. Like you said, Steve Garvey. I will say that the best thing about Gene the Dancing Machine is he could barely dance. He
Yeah,
was not a great dancer.
he
That's what made
barely
it.
moved.
That's what made it. He was like the worst dancer you'd ever want to watch, and that's what made it, you know?
Yeah, and,
But,
and Chuck,
the Gong Show was pushing envelopes. I don't know if this made the air, but, I hope I'm recalling this right, that, people would come on and they would either get gonged or they'd get to
sure,
stay on, and they had 2 what appeared to be college-age girls or maybe even high school-age girls, I hope they weren't,
with
and
popsicles.
all they did was sit there and eat popsicles,
Yes,
suck on the
yes, yes.
popsicles with "I'm in the mood for love" playing in the background.
Right.
I mean, talk about pushing the envelope. I mean,
What a
it's
revolutionary idea.
yes, yeah. I don't know even if that made the air. I know I saw it on some documentary, that whole thing, and I went, "Holy smokes!" They really were egging people on there. So Chuck Barris was a longtime game show producer.
He was.
People don't realize that and then he just stepped out in front of the camera for this. I'm sure they thought it wasn't going to work, and it worked. Wasn't it showing for like 8 years or something like that?
It was. There was a Gong Show movie in 1980, which was a huge flop, but, he was just a hilarious guy. I mean, he'd be out there with his Philadelphia Flyers jersey on, he'd have a hat pulled over his eyes pretty much, and just he was hilarious, and he just created this wild party that would be on every day on NBC about 12:30, or 12 noon, and, I mean, I was a kid, I was like a 6th grader when this was in its heyday, and I would, my grandmother's house was like 2 blocks from where my school was, my middle school, and I would just come home and have lunch, watch the Gong Show, and go back to school. No wonder I ended up the way I did, but, uh, no regrets here. No regret.
I remember the hostess of that show, C.V. Aberg, or
Oh,
Aberg, I
yeah.
don't know how they pronounce it, and I only reason I remember her is because she actually, here's some trivia for you, appeared in a science fiction movie with Mo Howard.
Really?
You can't
I
make this stuff up.
I can't believe that.
You can't make this stuff up. It was some cheapo, I think a rocket ship XM or something. It was just some weirdo 50s. The Stooges had kind of been thrown out of Columbia, and they were looking for work, and at one point, he acted in this little science fiction Miller, so I don't know what,
Wow.
and so did she. So, what can I say?
And I
What can
know,
I say?
Chuck Barris, his other major game shows that he produced were, Dating Game and Newlywed Game, which were both big, huge hits. And, there was another show I was gonna mention, Tattletales, which was on CBS with Bert Convy as the host, was a really, really popular show, and that seemed to be almost kind of a ripoff of Dating Game in the sense of, you have like a spouse, you're asking the spouse a question, then you bring them on later. The only difference is Tattletales had celebrities, and the Newlywed Game had just regular unknown couples, so that was the big caveat there.
I remember that. Wow, you're really jogging my memory bank here, man. I mean, did you watch all this stuff?
Of course.
You were really into this stuff?
Oh, yeah, yeah. I mean, I wasn't like, you know, um, I mean, it wasn't like I was seeking it. It was just that they were always on the air. I mean, again, this is the era of you had like maybe 9 or 10 channels total. So you didn't have like now where you have 300, 400 channels to go through plus streaming. I mean, there's only so much you could do back then, and these game shows were just hard to avoid.
They were, and not all of them were successful. I mean, I have a list here of game shows that fell through the cracks. They were not big deals. A couple of them lasted, but, we'll go over that in a bit. I just wanna see if you have any more, classics on your list there.
Um, No, I know, there's one infamous one that I've never even seen, but maybe you would remember it. I think, at the height of the popularity of Gong Show, I think Chuck Barris had this one show that lasted maybe a year or not even a year, but I think it was called, like, the $1.98 Beauty Show. Do you remember
Yes, the
that?
$1.98 beauty pageant in the '70s, yes, and
Yeah,
it was another frantic mess.
right.
It was really sexist, to be honest with you, and it was, these women would do these stupid stunts to win $1.98. I never understood it that much. I watched it once. I didn't
I
like
think
it. I just thought
I
it was
think it
silly.
I think it never aired where I live, but, I guess I imagined it as maybe a parody of a beauty contest.
That's exactly what it was, but it wasn't even that clever, to be honest with you. And I will say that I was lucky as a game show fan to live in upstate New York because they had 3 local stations that were always buying syndicated product for
Oh,
Sundays
yeah.
afternoons or
Sure.
Saturday nights before prime time and all that stuff, and that's where I saw most of these shows was on the syndicated, you know, other
Oh,
than the
me
network,
too.
but the problem was, all the ones I really like were on in the mornings, and I had to go to school.
Right.
I don't know how I saw Concentration so much, but I did see it, and this was long before the DVR days and the VCR days. You if you missed it, you missed it. So,
Right.
I guess I missed a lot of the ones I really liked. I just remember the wonderful primetime ones, like you said, like To Tell the Truth and I've Got a Secret. And there were
Yeah.
so many. It was frankly when I saw the game show make a comeback in recent years, I was a little bit surprised by that, but
Yeah.
they're
I
pulling
mean
it off really well. I mean, Press Your Luck's a pretty funny show.
mhm.
There's a few of them that are really good.
No, I guess I really prefer the classic ones. I mean, it's just hard to top them. I mean, like you mentioned, there is a couple of game show networks where you can go back and watch these old ones, and I know like you can definitely go to YouTube and search for them. There's at least a few of each show on YouTube. It seems like to watch, so that's always fun to revisit these.
Yes, it is. All right. Are we ready for some flops and
Please.
obscurities? This is the part of the show where we're going to look back at some game shows you may have never heard of, and you should be glad. Now, here's one for you. In 1974, 1975, there was a syndicated game show called Dealer's Choice. It looked like it was set in Las Vegas. Now, of all the people to choose as host, they chose Bob Hastings.
I remember Bob Hastings.
Bob
He was
Hastings
on,
was the ensign
F
on
Troop, I
McHale's
think.
Navy. No, McHale's
Mhm.
Navy.
Okay,
And he was also, Kelsey on The Odd Couple. And excuse me, he was Kelsey on All in the Family. He
okay,
was the bar owner in the original Kelsey's Bar.
okay.
And he was a character actor who'd been on every sitcom in the world. He flipped and flopped on every show in the world. But they chose him, and he only lasted the first season.
Ah,
And he didn't last long, and then he was replaced by veteran game show host Jack Clark, who was also on a lot of these syndicated fly-by-night. They would be on for a couple years and go off.
right.
The show was fast-paced, but it was really confusing. It was set in Vegas at the Tropicana, of all things, but it was noisy and grating. It was all kinda just people playing Vegas games for fun and prizes, and it just I was shocked when it hung around for a second year. It just didn't have it, you
Right.
know? And here's one where you take a creative comedian who was in between gigs. It was called Take a Good Look, and this goes back to the '50s or '60s. Ernie Kovacs was the host and creator of the show.
Mhm.
It's kind of an in between his variety show project. So he took a flyer and did a game show that he created, and it was similar to things like To Tell the Truth, I've Got a Secret, and What's My Line? But he used some of the comic actors he worked with to act out little comic scenes.
Like his
And
repertory
then
company.
guests like Cesar Romero and
Mhm.
Ava Gabor would try to figure out what they were referring to. They were clues. Each little scene was a clue that led to a thing that happened in history or something like that. I will say the thing was because it was Ernie Kovacs, nobody ever got the right answer. The clues were all like really obtuse and it just didn't work in terms of being a game show that you could follow really well. It lasted a couple of years, but rarely did the panel guess the secret of the guests we're having on. So the panelists represented a home viewer, in case you're wondering how it worked. And if they got it, the home viewer would win prizes as opposed to just guessing the stuff right. It was funny. The show was funny, but again, there was no intention of anybody ever winning the show because it was like, these weird, obtuse, they were funny little vignettes they had, but when you tried to put them together in your mind, what did A, B, and C mean? You know? But that's
I don't
Ernie
think it
Kovac for you.
well, I think like you say, it didn't resonate with the general public, but looking back on it now, Ernie Kovacs was so ahead of his time, and I think some of those may have ended up on a DVD
There's
or,
an entire set of the Take
mhm.
a Good Look show.
Oh,
You
that's
can
cool.
order it on Amazon. I've seen it there. As a Kovacs fan, I've ordered every Kovacs thing I could get my hands on. I haven't ordered that though,
Well,
but I've seen it. I've seen it
I
broadcast
I've
on
se
various places.
I've never been disappointed with anything related to Ernie Kovacs, so I'd say go and
No,
get it because it's phenomenal. Whatever he does, he was like
I
the
am.
Robin Williams of his day in the
He
50s.
was. I am dying to do an Ernie Kovacs show. I need to find somebody out there who may have known him or.
Mhm.
Um, he had a revival about, I guess at this point, it's about 10 years ago where they re-released all his stuff on DVDs and stuff like
Right,
that. And now you can find a lot of stuff streaming on Tubi and places like that or
right.
Pluto. So yeah, there's been a Kovacs revival in recent years, and I'm glad because he was the master of the blackout sketch. He was the guy
Oh,
who kind of
yeah,
invented it. Like a
yeah.
sketch with no dialogue that would just be like 5 seconds long. There'd be a comedy vignette, and they move on to another. Just a brilliant guy, and I think his stuff holds up after all these decades. So
Well, and I'm sure you would remember this in the late '70s. PBS did a retrospective on his
awesome.
work,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
that's how I discovered him because
Me
he was,
too.
gone, and it just blew us away. I mean, yeah, my brother and I were TV junkies and sports junkies, and this was so phenomenal. This is again before the era of VCRs. We couldn't tape this, but I think my brother probably audio taped it so we could listen to it again. And the minute that all of his work started getting put on DVDs and Blu-rays and what have you, we started getting them because, you had to have it. It was that good.
Well, our next little thing here is something you may have never heard of called jackpot bowling. Right? Not celebrity bowling or bowling for dollars. I have 3 bowling shows in a row here, okay? But this is jackpot bowling for a long time in the '50s, Milton Berle was TV's number 1 star. But by 1960, he was a replacement host. The show was on for a while. It was a sports show pretty much, hosted by Leo DeRocher, Mel Allen, if you can imagine this, or Bud Palmer, the sports guys. So, but by this year, they decided to give Milton Berle a chance, and he goes, "I'm going to make this show so popular they're going to refer to it as Burling."
Yeah, right.
That's the level of humor
Curling,
you
yeah, of
can
course.
expect on this particular program. The final season, the most famous thing that ever happened on the show, the comedian Harry Ritz appeared on the show and bowled himself down the lane for a strike. He literally didn't let go of the ball and went skidding all the way down into the pit and scored a strike for himself. It was a strange little show. I hesitate to tell anybody to watch it. I don't think it worked at all.
Y y
But what did work was a show in the '70s called Celebrity Bowling, hosted by
Okay,
Jed Allen, who was
right.
a character actor, and you could watch McLean Stephen and William Demarest bowl for fun and prizes. For
Yeah.
somebody in the studio audience, they'd win Hager slacks and Rich's party mints or something like that. It's just but that worked. That show worked. And in one classic episode, guess who teamed up together? Sammy Davis Jr. and Carol O'Connor.
Oh, that's awesome,
So
and,
they know what they were doing. They'd have little themey shows and stuff like that. And there would be a real pro bowler in the booth with Jed Allen to describe to the contestants really, here's what you do to bowl. And some of them turned out to be really good bowlers. And
Well, well,
most of them were pretty lame as bowlers, but, it still worked as comedy, and I love that show personally.
I think one of the celebrity bowlers was Don Adams, better known as Maxwell Smart from Get
Mhm.
Smart,
Yep.
and those episodes, I think you can find them on YouTube if you search hard enough.
Oh, they're all over the place. Yeah,
Hmm.
celebrity bowling's all over the place. I have to give a shout out to 1970s Bowling for Dollars, which I believe was syndicated, and you
Hmm.
could put on your own local Bowling for Dollars show. And
Right.
here in New York, for one glorious season, Bowling for Dollars was hosted by the Met announcer Bob Murphy.
Okay.
If you can imagine this, right?
I can.
And it's almost like they put people on the show who were guaranteed not to win a thing. They had a guy in a wheelchair once. I mean, it was
Hmm.
you can't make this stuff up. And I haven't bowled, but I love to try it. Okay, let's see if we can get 10 pins on 2 balls, and that was basically the show, and nobody ever did, and they won a bag of cat food or something, it was just it didn't work, and they kept reviving it, it just didn't work, so enough for Bowling for Dollars. Now, Joe Garagiola, another sports guy. Did you know he hosted a couple of game shows?
Okay.
Actually, 3 of them. One was called He Said, She Said. Another one was Joe Garagiola's Memory Game, and the most famous one he hosted was Sale of the Century,
Right.
where people would, I think they would accumulate points throughout the show and then be able to bid on amazing, prizes that were all sitting there in a pile. I want that. Yay!
Right.
But the most famous thing that ever happened on the show was Garagiola accidentally cursed on the air. I mean, really
Really?
bad, really bad.
Really?
I think what happened, it was a commercial spot in between the game,
Uh-huh.
and they put the wrong tape on.
Okay.
I honestly think that's what happened. They put the wrong bit of tape where they were supposed to scrap this tape and then recut it. They put this tape that was supposed to be scrapped on, and he just curses up a blue streak. He had to come on TV the next week and apologize, and, it was a rough period for him. It really made headlines too.
Yeah.
So,
Well, he was
that
a
that
great guy.
yeah, oh my gosh, he actually ended up, hosting the Westminster Dog Show for a couple of years late in
Well,
his career.
I mean, he did everything though. I mean, from the Today Show to wrestling to baseball game of the week. I mean, he covered every base really.
Yeah, sure. Now here's another bomb, lasted 1 episode, hosted by Jackie Gleason. It was called You're in the Picture. Okay, it was in 1961. This was the year to put famous people in game shows, and what happened was he hosted the only episode, and it's considered one of the biggest bombs in TV history. It was done in
Mhm.
prime time. Famous panelists would stick their heads through life-size illustrations. They'd literally stick their heads and act out scenes in historic moments, and then the panelists would ask Gleason questions about what the pictures meant. So the people who were the actors sticking their heads through the pictures didn't know what they were talking about, and they'd have to try to figure it out, and I don't know who won prizes, but all I know is it's a legendary it lasted 1 episode. Gleason came on back with his variety show the next week and said, "What a bomb."
He
He was just
apologized.
all he was all over it, he apologized for it. But that's made it part of TV history.
Yeah, yeah, it's surprising, Jackie Gleason's one of the all-time great TV personalities. He only made one appearance on The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson, I think it was in 1983, and, he does acknowledge that moment on that interview, and that's on YouTube, and he said exactly what you said. He went on the air the first opportunity he could that next Saturday night and apologized to the whole country for, that game show that flopped so, massively.
Now here's one that wasn't a flop and kept coming back, and I kinda liked it. Remember Beat the Clock?
Yeah, Beat the Clock, yeah,
Beat the
look,
Clock,
kind of a low budget game.
yeah. Couples would show up and they'd have to, do some stunty thing, like balance some plates on a pin or something, and they'd win valuable cash prizes and always Richardson's Party Mints. I don't know why they were such a popular game show prize, but they had a bunch of hosts, Bud Collyer, Jack Narrs, Monty Hall for a while, Gene Wood, and SNL's Gary Kroger on a later version that was, I believe, on the Game Show Network.
Interesting.
So, yeah, Beat the Clock kept coming back, and, I know all I remember about the show really is that most guests would end up covered in whipped cream. I don't know how that worked, but, they were doing some weird cooking thing, and, I kinda liked it as a kid. I didn't really like it so much when I saw the revivals later on, so. And now we go to the '70s. Nobody remembers The Cheap Show,
The teacher,
hosted
I
by
don't know that.
Dick Martin of Rowan& Martin's Laugh-In. And the hostess was a chronically befuddled Janelle Price, and the show was a parody of game shows.
Okay.
But it gave a lot of funny people like Charlie Callis, Eva Gabor, Truman Capote a chance to be on TV a little more.
Sure.
But I remember some really hilarious lines by this woman, Janelle Price. She said something that I have said the whole rest of my life. They're going to a commercial break, and she goes, "Dick, is it cheaper to walk to work or bring my lunch?" And I have used that constantly in the years since. It was actually a very funny show. The Cheap Show, right around the same time as the $1.98 beauty pageant, these tongue-in-cheek, sardonic, strange game shows.
Sure.
Yeah, I have a list here of my top 10 game show hosts that I
Let's hear
think
it.
should be given a tip of the cap.
Let's hear it.
Now, I'm sorry there aren't any women on this list, but as I said, they were all sophisticated pointing devices back in the day.
Right.
And now we have, people that are female that are hosting the shows finally, Mary Edith Vieira and all kinds of
Right.
people. So, but this is a old-timey show. So these are old-timey hosts for the
Sure.
most part. I got to give a tip of the cap to Alex Trebek,
Mhm.
who people don't realize did more than just Jeopardy.
Right.
He also hosted one of the concentration revivals
Mhm.
and another show that it's escaping me, but I remember he did another one that was on in the
Sure.
mornings.
Mhm.
Wink Martindale who just left us recently, was on 1,000 different shows,
Yeah.
and he was like the quintessential handsome, polite game show host with a slight sense of humor, and he could really keep the shows going along. Because of how many shows he's on, he made the list. Bill Cullen, both as a host and a guest, he was always on television for decades.
Hall of Famer, no doubt about it.
Yeah. Pat Sajak, only because of the longevity of that show. I mean,
Mm.
of Wheel of Fortune, he became part of America's after dinner entertainment for ages, or dinner time entertainment. You'd put your card tables up, eat dinner while you're watching me. I know I have old relatives that did that. They'd watch the
Right.
Wheel of Fortune and Jeopardy, right? I have Gene Rayburn on just for being so doggone funny. Monty Hall was a big game show person, both in front of the camera and behind the scenes. He was part of the productions, and I mean, let's make a deal. He's part of Americana. Steve Harvey's on there just for being so doggone good at what he does. Alan Ludden, we didn't mention Password.
Oh, yeah.
Password's one of the all-time great shows. One of the more thought-provoking, seriously entertaining game shows. They would have comedians on as guests, but you would really struggle to figure out the answer to the clue. It
Well
was a lot of fun.
well, and not only was Password one of the most iconic, game shows of the '60s or '70s, there was never a better use of a game show in a sitcom than when Oscar and Felix went on Password with Alan Ludden and, the graphite and, the great clues that they were giving each other. But yeah, the Odd Couple episode of with Password with Alan Ludden and Betty White is, it's hard to say there's an elite Odd Couple episode. They're all good, but that's one that people remember and talk about to this day.
Well, did you know, I think it was TV Guide magazine or some famous magazine listed it very high on one of the greatest single episodes of
It's
television
gotta be.
history.
It's gotta be.
Way up there. I mean, like top 5. I
Yeah.
mean, it was really lauded. I mean, and then we have, we said Alan Leonard, Hugh Downs. You know what? He probably doesn't belong on the list, but he was the host of the first show I ever watched, so he made my list anyway.
Oh,
And I
yeah.
got to give a shout out to the original host of Jeopardy, Art Fleming.
Oh, yes.
People don't remember that it was on NBC, that show, and it was on every day. It was a daytime show, Jeopardy, for years. And the host was the genial and very collegiate acting Art Fleming. Let's go to the question. He was just a very upbeat guy with a deep voice, and I enjoyed his work.
In the late '80s when Howard Stern had a show on WOR, it was the Howard Stern show on WOR for a couple of years. He had on Art Fleming, he had on Gene Rayburn. They did recreate some of the game shows with a Howard Stern spin on them, so that was a lot of fun. It was good to see Art Fleming again. He put on a little weight, but it was great to see him again. And because you mentioned sports earlier when you were mentioning the bowling shows, there was a sports-related game show that aired oftentimes in syndication only on the weekends I think it was called Sports Challenge. I think it was Dick
Yes.
Engberg. Dick
Oh my
Engberg.
gosh.
Remember Sports
I
Challenge?
love Sports Challenge. That was the
Yeah.
greatest. Dick Enberg, right?
So it would air usually like maybe say if the Mets were coming on say at 1:30, this would air at 1, or if the game was ending at 4:30, this would air at 4:30, and they'd have contestants and they would do all these great sports trivia questions. So it was all sports trivia, and they'd have clips and still photos. You had to guess who these people were, and it was a great weekend sports sports related game show. They gave you the feel of a game show on the weekend since most of the shows were on weekdays.
Oh, man, that was one of my favorites. I can't believe I didn't remember that. Thank you for bringing that up. No,
My
that was
pleasure.
really when I was 12, 13, 14 years old, that was it. I watched we had it on Saturday evenings around 6:30 it came on. I loved
Okay.
that show. The only thing that bugged me about the show is the applause was definitely dubbed in. They had this raucous
Okay.
studio audience sound. You know
Right.
there was no studio audience when they filmed these things. It just wasn't. But
Yeah.
it would only appear at the end of the thing. You wouldn't even hear the studio audience when they were answering the questions, just the beginning and the end. It just seemed kind of fake, but I loved the show. I really thought it was great. And
That
you
was
know
fun.
something? It was educational.
Yeah.
You would learn stuff about sports you did not know watching. Great clips throughout, you know? Oh, that was great. Sports Challenge. You're bringing them back, baby. That's a good one. That's a
Oh,
good one.
but it just again, I'm not gonna say anything negative about today's society, but in a more simple
Why not?
time, in a more simple time, I mean, life was so much more simple, and people were so much more satisfied. I think, yeah, again, to be negative for a second, when people, every person in the world is glued to a cell phone and it's and in their face the whole day, I mean, you can't appreciate anything else. And these shows on TV were like little diversions, little taking you to Hollywood or taking you to somewhere else or taking you to sports trivia, and you could think about something else, stress free, just enjoy your life. And now everything is stressful. Every aspect of our lives is stressful. So it's really everything's changed.
I agree with your summation there, and I'll take it a step further. The thing is, everything is that's produced now in entertainment is so loud and boisterous. There's never a
Right,
moment to think.
right,
These older shows, like a Concentration, was a very quiet show. All you would hear is the whizzing of the game board, when they changed
right,
it from a number to a clue or something like that,
right.
or a question. They were quiet, these shows. They were just
They very
questions and
quiet,
answers. Very
very quiet.
quiet. Once in a while, you hear an audience applaud, but that was basically it. There wasn't like today's shows are just the prime time ones are these giant game boards that whoosh and make big noises and, bum, ba, 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 bum, ba, ba. The noises, you can't get away from it. It's like pro wrestling now. It's noisy. Everything is just blaring. Or if
Yeah,
you go, I hate to say this, if you go to a baseball game at Citi Field, it
yeah,
is it is jarring. You
right.
cannot hear yourself for 3 hours.
It's constant noise.
Constant noise, constant digital noise. That has been a controversy in the New York Daily News of late. People are writing in complaining about what they call the digital noise at Citi Field, and I'm gonna write a letter. I have letters published, by the way, in the Daily News all the time.
Okay.
All the time. I write them all the time, and they usually publish them. I'm gonna join my voice to that chorus because why do you need all that stuff? It's isn't the baseball the entertainment? Do you need the flashing lights? Do you need the loud music? Do you need
I know.
constant cacophony
The,
of
the
kooky
baseball
stuff?
becomes number 57 on the list of reasons why you're in the ballpark.
Yeah.
It's not even the top 5 reasons.
It's true. The food and everything else is considered part of the whole thing, and, it's not simple anymore. It's not baseball's supposed to be pastoral,
But
right?
I know how you and Brian Solomon did a great show a few months ago about the classic cartoons that we grew up on, and again, not to be so negative, but going back to like in maybe 20 years ago, 30 years ago, there was a show called Rugrats that came on, and all it was just constant noise, constant screaming. There used to be in these cartoons, you go back to the old ones with Huckleberry Hound or Yogi Bear, a real civility, something that kids could watch and
Um,
learn to respect their elders?
I have to take issue with that.
Okay.
Huckleberry Hound, which was
Okay.
I watched when I was 3, okay?
Okay.
Probably the
Okay.
first thing I ever remember seeing.
Okay.
They were always whipping out guns and shooting at each other in those
That's
cartoons. I'm
not good.
sorry.
Oh, that's not
Hanna-Barbera
good.
would end up in a gunfight, and you'd see 1,000 bullets flying or nobody ever got shot, of course. But they were a little bit, violent, but everybody accepted that level of violence because it was
Right.
cartoon violence. It
Right,
wasn't
right, right.
real. But
But
still, they were whipping out guns on the shows all the
well, I
time.
don't recommend that, but I mean, on some of these newer shows, and again, it's just all noise, it's all, like, instead of, like, teaching a child to be respectful of their parent, it's more like, just talk back to them, get in their face, yell louder than they do, and it just, again, why our society's in the shape it's in. It's just there's no respect for anybody.
Yeah, I agree. You know, sitcoms in the last 20, 30 years are all put downs. They're all
Yeah,
people putting each other down for half an hour, and
yeah,
it's usually the plot is always one-upsmanship,
yeah,
and that's how people act now. Everybody's trying to go to any place where there's a floor where a bunch of people work in a business, somebody's trying to one up somebody else,
yeah.
and I think it's wrong, and I think it's just, but we're being a little preachy here. All I know is this: I am thankful to be the age I am, and I could go back in time with someone like Steve here and go back and look at these wonderful shows that we really used to enjoy, from the bombs to the hits. Game shows are fun, and I never got around to the one I'm loyal to now.
Let's hear it.
Funny you should ask. Have you ever seen it?
I don't know what you're gonna say.
Oh, there you go. Okay, it's called Funny You Should Ask.
Okay,
It's a Byron Allen show that
okay,
that that is shown on his networks, the Grio and his comedy.tv and stuff like that. And it's
alright,
also syndicated here on a Long Island station. It's
okay.
it's on every day. And it's basically a reworking of the Hollywood Squares. Six people are sitting in
Awesome,
chairs across the stage, and
awesome.
they ask questions, "Is he right or is he wrong?" That's basically the show, and whoever gets the most points goes on to a bonus round and wins $5,000 if they go all the way.
Okay,
They get all the questions right. But the comedians are all A-listers. It's
right.
amazing. Uh, Jeff Ross, Whitney Cummings, John Lovitz, um, all kind Howie Mandel, Byron Allen takes one of the chairs, and he used to be a stand-up in his day. And it's a rotating group of comedians that are on there. Jamie Kennedy, just go down the list. It is hysterical.
I
The
gotta check
show is
it out. I
really
didn't know about it.
legitimately funny, and you can practically find it, just type it in your cable or whatever, and it's always on somewhere. Funny you should ask. It has the ratings probably of a test pattern, but it's been on almost 10 years now. So seriously, and it's good. It's really funny. I mean, legitimately funny.
Well, I gotta check it out, and being that you mentioned comedy, there's one show that was not like a big hit. It was on briefly, but it really had, it was really I thought it was quite funny for its time. Do you remember, Make Me Laugh with Bobby Van? Remember that?
I do, but barely. You're right. Make me laugh. Yeah.
It was a show that was on it was syndicated in New York. It was on WPAX and would run, I think, at 7:30 at night, and it'd have different comics come on, and what the idea of the game was is they'd have a comedian there stand there and do his set for someone that's sitting there, and the contestant had to try not to laugh, and the comedians would always make them laugh because they just knew what to say or embarrass them or scare them or whatever, or they would trip them up. And it was really a neat show. For its time, it was very, very popular. And they had a lot of the top comedians of that era on there. And it was a lot of fun.
Let me get this straight, because I remember watching it, and I don't remember. Was the idea to make someone laugh? He's
Yes.
trying not to laugh.
For the contestant it was you try not to laugh because if you
Right.
last a minute, you win a prize. But if you laugh, then you lose. So that was the idea of the game.
And the people were really funny that were the guests. That's what made that show. I remember that wasn't a bad show. Now you're making me remember it. That one popped out of my mind completely.
Yeah, it was fun. It was a fun show, definitely.
Oh, awesome. Awesome. There is no end to these shows. And I want to tell the people listening out there, if you love old game shows, there is a streaming service called Buzzer
Mhm.
that you can go to. It's 24 hours a day of nothing but classic game shows, like Black and White Concentration and Bert Convy shows and the Alex Trebek Jeopardies and other stuff, and it just goes on and on and on. Also, if a lot of the streaming things have tons of game shows on them, like the Tubies and the Plutos of the world,
Okay.
they'll have an entire section of game shows, and it'll
Right.
be 24 hours of that game show. They just run it and run it and run it and run it. So, and by the way, before I let you go, we talked about Star Trek on our most popular episode, by the way.
You gotta be kidding me.
No, the Star Trek episode is our most popular episode to date of the Outdated Entertainment Hour. So thank you for contributing to that. Oh, by a mile. That one kicks some serious booty. Now,
Great.
I want you to know I just got in the mail, and I talked to people about this, my Facebook friends, that I got the first and second seasons of the original Star Trek on DVD. I got them, in the original format, that not the remastered, but the original ones. So
Cool.
I'm ready to sit down and hunker down, and I look at my Roku box, and Star Trek, the original, is back on streaming.
No, it's okay. It's good that you have them, though. Physical media is something to be said for having it because you never know how they edit them anyhow, so at
True.
least you have them.
But I believe Pluto and one of the other there's a 24-hour Star Trek station now on one of the, but it's all the original 3 seasons, which is a
Right.
cool thing. And
It is
I think
cool.
they're showing them in order, so depending on when you tune in, you could see any of the 3 seasons. But it's nice to see them back accessible and free, that you don't have to pay to watch those. I think you have to pay to watch the remastered versions on Paramount Plus,
When
which
when
I
you
believe
when
is the case.
when you watch, Star Trek, I think you'll be blown away by how good it is, how it really has stood the test of time. I mean, yeah, maybe some of the effects look a little dated, but the stories, the characterizations, the relationships of the characters, the writing, it's so top notch. I think the show will endure forever, honestly. And the message it sends about we are going to outlive these current day traumas that we're living in. It's more important than ever to watch a show like Star Trek.
The acting is superb. The writing is excellent, and they really delve into some deep stuff without making you think it's deep stuff. Like, when you
Right,
watch an episode, they looked at racism, they looked at, unfairness, they looked at,
right.
planets battling against each other and how it was wrong to do that, that type of thing. It was really heady.
Oh yeah,
Considering it was on a shoestring budget, it looked great. And like I said, the actors brought it home. I mean, Shatner and Nimoy, I
and
mean, come
DeForest
on,
Kelly.
one of the great DeForest Kelley, I don't wanna forget
Yeah.
anybody else in the cast, but I think most people who aren't Trekkies or Trekkers think of Nimoy and Shatner,
Oh,
and I'll
sure, sure.
I'll tell you what, they really were an indelible television pair. I mean,
Yeah.
they just worked so well together, and it's a all-time classic. Thank you, Lucille Ball, and everybody else who put it together, and I thank you again for appearing on our Star Trek show. We may have
No,
to follow
loved
that
it.
up someday because it was such a hit here that, I think people would wanna know more if we can dig up some facts and figures about the show.
Oh, absolutely, and especially in the time we're living in right now, especially this very day, there's an episode called "A Taste of Armageddon," where these characters are walking into this box that essentially kills them, and the story is that these people on this planet are in a war, and rather than going into actual physical war, they're going into a machine that kills them voluntarily because it's like all a numbers racket. But it's like it speaks to what's going on in the world today. I mean, it's sad what's happening in our real world, but watching a show like Star Trek, it really makes you think, and it has some ideas. I mean, if you go on any streaming channel, there's lots of interesting new shows and good shows that are out there, but not too many of them make you think. So this is something worthwhile to watch.
I gotta give you and, our Steve Genarelli here and Brian R. Solomon, who were on the subject of credit, because these are 2 guys who refer to the shows by season number and title. Those are real Trekkers. Those are the real Trek fans. Yeah, well, season 8, The Trouble with Tribbles, or season 2,
Right?
episode 16, whatever it was. They could pull it out like I'm remembering my Social Security number. It's amazing. So I find that to be most endearing. I because that's a fan. That's a fan of something. That shows the level of entertainment that you got from that series. And I don't think you're obsessed with it. That's the beauty part. I've seen people that get really obsessed with these things.
Well, I mean, the nice thing is like with Bob and I, like Bob's a diehard Mets fan. I'm a diehard Yankees fan. We know the Yankees and the Mets inside out, and this is just something else to know inside out. That's all.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know. Like I say, I'm a funny sports fan. I don't have a favorite player. I don't cry if my team loses. I am a guy who sits down and watches a baseball game and manages in my head. That's the
Right.
fun of it for me.
You outthink the manager. That's right.
Like the Mets had a horrible, as we talk, had a horrible loss last night. They were ahead 5-1 and ended up losing in extra innings through gaffes, right?
Hmm.
To me, I was just more interested in why it happened than the fact that they lost.
Yeah.
I'm weird that way. I'm a stats guy. I'm an agate guy. I'm the guy who reads the box scores every
I
day
love
to this
that.
day.
I love it.
I still do it. I still do it. To me, that's the fun of it.
It
And
is.
I guess I like the numbers and I like the strategies. You know, I'm different. You see people just literally crying when their team loses at the end of the season or something like that. I could never do that.
Right. No, I don't
There are
either.
men who I will save my tears for real tragedies, not my baseball
Yeah.
team. It's just
Right.
the way things work. But that's just the way I am. I know people who are exactly the other way. I have a good close friend who's a fan of the Carolina Panthers football team. Talk about a life of anguish, right? So it's like, get your fun where you can get it, whether they be game shows, sports, or whatever, or by listening to the Outdated Entertainment Hour with great guests like Steve Genarelli. Steve, it's always such a pleasure, man. You're such a good friend to the show and to me, and you're a big reason for the success of everything. And I really want to thank you very much publicly because you are a podcaster in excelsis.
Well, thank you for the nice compliments, Bob. But our friendship means a lot to me too. We just kind of met by happenstance, and we shared our love of wrestling, and now we're real friends in real life. And having me on your show, and hopefully we'll get you back on Stick to Wrestling with John McAdams soon. Every little bit that we do together, it just makes the world a better place, I think.
for for my 9 listeners, sure. No, I'm being facetious, but no, I kind of feel the same way. All this stuff is all labor of love, and when I say labor, I mean labor. I'm going to
Yeah.
tell you a little secret right
You're a
here.
one-man band.
I had a podcast recently on the other show that I do
Okay.
that came out bad. I told you about this. Yes, it came out very bad, audio wise. I had a guest come on, and he couldn't get into my studio, this studio.
Right.
So I went to my alternate studio that you've seen too,
Sure.
but he still couldn't get his volume on. I said, "That's it. We're gonna go do the podcaster's desperation. You go to his phone. You talk on your cell phone, and we can record on the cell phone." And we did. But what I didn't do, so I was so happy to hear him. It took us an hour, right? So I'm so happy to hear my guest that I neglected to rejigger my Shure SM7B microphone. This is the apple of my eye. It's the mic I always wanted to use, but
Mhm.
you gotta be careful with it because it's powerful. I never reset it. I overmodulated my track on the whole show. It was
Okay.
too loud. Just
Okay.
for layman's terms, it was too loud. It was distorting. What's a mother to do? So what I did was, this is the truth. It took me 15 hours.
Holy cow.
I re-recorded all of my questions.
Holy
Dubbed them in and split it up piece by piece by piece by piece by piece. It's a show that was recently out, and nobody said a word about it in terms of the listeners being able to tell
Nobody knew.
that I did it that way. Now, the beauty part is I must be a pretty good editor. The problem is I don't wanna be an editor. I don't wanna spend 15 hours. The Stick to Wrestling podcast with John McAdam. At least you guys have Luke Hippelman working with you, right? So you pretty much send the thing off and it gets fixed, right? Which is
He
a problem.
does all the magic. He does.
Yes, I have to do my own magic, and it's like I'm starting to wonder if I'm yeah. It's like I said, 15 hours. At the end of the show, I said it's 1:13 on a Saturday morning, and I'm finally finishing up, fans. So thank you and good night. So I don't know what to say other than this stuff is work, gang. And the fact that you all listen to both of my podcasts, I really appreciate it out there because while it is a labor of love, it is also time consuming and You got to be meticulous with the stuff if you want people to hear it right. That's all I have to say. So, but thanks to guys like Steve Genarelli, he makes my workday easy and puts out great shows like the one we just talked about. Steve, come back soon, will you?
I sure will, Bob. Thanks for the invite. We'll do this again sometime soon.
I hope so. Steve Genarelli, everybody.
Hi, everybody. This is Joe Walsh. One thing I do when I'm not playing rock and roll is get on the air as an amateur radio operator. Also called ham radio, is a communication service provided by ordinary people just like you and me. Ham radio operators are everywhere, in your city, your area, your neighborhood, in any country you go to. We have a national emergency communication system in place 24/7, 365. In case of natural or man-made disasters, earthquakes, tornadoes, hurricanes, floods, you name it, we're there. Find out more about amateur radio at arrl.org/whatishamradio. See you on the air.
I truly enjoyed that one, and I hope you did too. Find me on Facebook. I'm the only Bob Smith singing with B.B. King, who, was a blues singer for a while. I can prove it to you by showing you that photo. Find me on X. I think I'm Outdated Bob there. I'm also at Blue Sky, Instagram, and Threads, kind of by osmosis. I'm not really on Threads, but I do glance at it on occasion. But anyway, I'm all over social media, outdated_Bob at most of those places, and just Bob Smith. At Facebook, BB King Bob Smith. Boy, am I proud of that. I've had 1,000 different lives. I'm very happy to have lived them all. Join us next time in the Outdated Entertainment Hour. Until then, in the words of Ringo Starr, peace and love, brothers and sisters. Peace and love.